In a quiet New England suburb, a 68-year-old literature professor was about to uncover a deadly betrayal. What started as a routine hospital stay for pneumonia took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her daughter-in-law's true intentions. Eleanor Morrison wasn't your typical grandmother. For 3 decades, she had spent her life shaping young minds at the university, known for her analytical precision and quiet resilience beneath her grief-stricken exterior. When she overheard Katherine's cold words to Dr. Chen, "She won't be around much longer anyway," she had no idea she was witnessing the first thread unraveling in an elaborate scheme to steal her estate. Eleanor's strategic performance of frailty would lead to a dangerous game of deception and counter-deception that would expose not just Katherine's financial desperation, but a pattern of predatory behavior. What began as a struggle for survival would become a journey of reclamation and renewal. The Morrison family would never be the same after Eleanor proved that perceived vulnerability could be transformed into her greatest weapon against those who had written off her remaining years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pneumonia had settled in Eleanor Morrison's lungs like an unwelcome tenant. Each breath a negotiation she wasn't certain she'd win. Strange how the hospital's fluorescent lights made everything appear both harsh and insubstantial at once. 68 years of living reduced to the beep of machines and the whisper of oxygen through plastic tubing. Eleanor drifted between consciousness and something deeper, more fragmented. In these hazy moments, memories surfaced unbidden. Robert's laugh during their last anniversary dinner, the weight of leather-bound books in the university library, where she'd spent 30 years teaching, the particular quality of October light through her study window. Then the fever would spike again, and the present would reassert itself with merciless clarity. The antiseptic smell, the distant squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the perpetual chill that no number of thin hospital blankets could chase away. She'd been admitted 3 days ago. Or was it 4? The pneumonia had come on suddenly, transforming what she'd dismissed as a winter cold into something that left her gasping for air in her kitchen, the telephone receiver clutched in trembling fingers as she called for help. Voices in the hallway pulled Eleanor from her half-sleep, Katherine's voice, unmistakable with its practiced charm, and another she recognized as Dr. Chen's. Eleanor kept her eyes closed, conserving what little energy she had. Their conversation drifted through the partially open door. "The treatment Dr. Patel suggested is quite expensive," Katherine was saying, her tone gently concerned. "And given Eleanor's overall condition." "The antibiotics aren't working as quickly as we'd hoped," Dr. Chen replied. "The specialized treatment could significantly improve her recovery time and prevent complications." Eleanor felt herself drifting again, the conversation becoming background noise until Katherine's next words sliced through her fog with surgical precision. "I just don't see the point in wasting resources," Katherine said, her voice now stripped of its performative warmth. "She won't be around much longer anyway. Her health has been declining since Robert died." Eleanor's eyes opened, fixed on the acoustic ceiling tiles above her bed. The rhythmic beeping of her heart monitor accelerated slightly, the only external sign of the cold shock spreading through her system. "Mrs. Morrison," Dr. Chen's voice had taken on a careful neutrality. "While your mother-in-law is certainly facing challenges, her underlying health is actually quite good, with proper treatment. My husband and I have discussed this," Katherine interrupted smoothly. "We think comfort care is the most appropriate path forward. Michael is having a difficult time accepting his mother's decline, but I've been helping him prepare." Eleanor's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the thin blanket. 2 years of subtle changes crystallized in her mind. The mysteriously disconnected telephone that left her reliant on Katherine to relay messages, friends' calls that were never returned, the gradually increasing isolation as Katherine became the gatekeeper to her world. She'd attributed it all to grief after Robert's death. Her withdrawal, her foggy thinking, her reluctance to engage. But now, with Katherine's cold assessment hanging in the air, Eleanor recognized the deliberate pattern with devastating clarity. The door pushed open wider as Katherine and Dr. Chen entered the room. Katherine's face immediately transformed, compassion replacing calculation so seamlessly that Eleanor might have doubted what she'd heard if the words weren't still echoing in her mind. "You're awake," Katherine said softly, approaching the bed with practiced concern. "How are you feeling, Eleanor? Any better?" She reached for Eleanor's hand, squeezed it with just the right pressure to appear caring without being overly familiar. Eleanor allowed her eyelids to flutter weakly. "A bit tired," she whispered, watching Katherine with new awareness. Dr. Chen moved to the other side of the bed, checking the monitors. "Your oxygen levels are improving, Mrs. Morrison. That's encouraging." Katherine's smile remained fixed, but Eleanor caught the brief flash of disappointment in her eyes. "That's wonderful news," Katherine said, the enthusiasm in her voice not quite reaching her eyes. "Michael will be so relieved. He's been trying to get away from work to visit." The mention of her son sent a dull ache through Eleanor's chest. That had nothing to do with pneumonia. Michael's visits had grown increasingly brief and awkward over the past 2 years. She'd blamed herself, assuming her grief over Robert had created a barrier between them. Now she wondered what narrative Katherine had been crafting about her. As if summoned by his name, Michael appeared in the doorway, tall like his father, with the same serious expression Robert had worn when preoccupied. He hesitated before entering, his discomfort palpable. "Mom," he said, approaching the bed with careful formality. "You had us worried." Katherine immediately took control of the conversation. "The doctor was just telling us Mom's doing a bit better today. Though we need to be realistic about recovery at her age." Eleanor watched her son's face, searching for some sign of the boy who'd once spent hours discussing literature with her in the garden. Michael nodded, his eyes not quite meeting hers. "Whatever you think is best," he said to Katherine. "You've been managing everything so well." The visit lasted exactly 17 minutes. Eleanor found herself counting to keep her mind focused, to prevent the rage and hurt from overwhelming her. Katherine dominated the conversation, speaking for Eleanor when Dr. Chen asked questions, interpreting Eleanor's silence as confusion rather than observation. After they left, Michael with a promise to return soon, Katherine with a perfectly calibrated kiss to Eleanor's forehead, Dr. Chen remained behind, reviewing Eleanor's chart with a slight frown. "Mrs. Morrison," she said finally, "I'd like to try the treatment I mentioned. I believe it will significantly improve your condition." Eleanor studied the young doctor's face, noting the faint lines of concern between her brows. Katherine seemed reluctant, she said carefully. Dr. Chen's expression remained professional, but her eyes held Eleanor's with quiet intensity. "As your physician, my primary concern is your well-being, and I believe this treatment is in your best interest." When Eleanor was alone again, she turned her face toward the window, where late afternoon light cast long shadows across the parking lot below. The world looked different now, edges sharper, colors more defined. The betrayal had burned away, too, years of fog, leaving behind a clarity that was both painful and necessary. Eleanor Morrison had spent the past 2 years slowly disappearing, becoming the diminished, confused woman Katherine described to Michael, and, she now realized, to others. She'd allowed grief to hollow her out, making space for Katherine's carefully constructed narrative. That ended today. As her discharge was processed the following morning, Eleanor made a decision. She would appear just as Katherine wanted her to, frail, confused, dependent. She would play the role Katherine had created for her, but beneath that performance, she would be gathering strength, collecting evidence, and reclaiming the truth of her life. Katherine wanted her gone? Eleanor allowed herself a small, private smile as she was wheeled toward the hospital exit. Katherine would discover that Eleanor Morrison wasn't quite finished living yet. Marcus's hand. Here is the story you will be, generating. In a quiet suburban town in present-day New England, 68-year-old Eleanor Morrison finds herself at the center of a family power struggle after being hospitalized with a severe case of pneumonia. When Eleanor overhears her daughter-in-law Katherine coldly telling her doctor to withhold treatment because she won't be around much longer anyway, Eleanor is confronted with a devastating truth. Her son's wife has been slowly poisoning family relationships while positioning herself to inherit Eleanor's substantial estate. What makes this story compelling is that instead of breaking under this betrayal, Eleanor decides to fight back with quiet determination. Upon discharge, she pretends to be more frail than she is, using her supposed decline as cover while she secretly works to uncover Katherine's manipulations, reconnect with her estranged son, and rewrite the ending Katherine has planned for her. The narrative explores themes of elder abuse, family loyalty, greed versus love, and finding strength when you're perceived as powerless. As Eleanor investigates, she discovers her daughter-in-law's desperate financial troubles and a web of lies that threatens to tear apart not just Eleanor's family, but others in the community as well. Eleanor stared at the familiar facade of her colonial-style home through the car window as Katherine pulled into the circular driveway. The white clapboard and black shutters that had once represented sanctuary now loomed like the false front of a stage set. This wasn't coming home. This was entering enemy territory. "Here we are," Katherine announced with practiced brightness, her voice carrying the particular cadence she reserved for public performances of dutiful daughter-in-law. "Grace should be here already. You'll like her, Eleanor. She comes highly recommended." Eleanor nodded weakly, maintaining the facade of fragility she'd begun crafting in the hospital. "That's nice of you," she murmured, deliberately slurring her words slightly. She fumbled with her seatbelt, noting how quickly Katherine's smile tightened at the corners. "Let me help you with that," Katherine said, her impatience barely concealed beneath a veneer of solicitousness. Eleanor allowed herself to be assisted from the car, leaning more heavily on Katherine's arm than necessary, feeling a grim satisfaction when her daughter-in-law stiffened under the burden. The front door opened, revealing a young Asian woman in simple scrubs. Her expression was professional but kind as she stepped forward. "Mrs. Morrison, welcome home. I'm Grace Liu." Her voice was gentle but not condescending. "I've prepared your room with everything Dr. Chen recommended." Eleanor studied the young woman carefully while maintaining her appearance of vague confusion. Something in Grace's direct gaze suggested intelligence and perception. Katherine had likely chosen her for her credentials, not realizing those same qualifications might make Grace more difficult to manipulate. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor mumbled, allowing herself to be guided into the house. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood enveloped her, but underneath lay something different. Katherine's perfume had infiltrated spaces where it never used to reach. As they moved through the foyer, Eleanor's trained eye noted subtle changes. Her collection of first editions had been rearranged on the built-in shelves, with several volumes missing entirely. The antique side table that had been Robert's grandfather's was gone, replaced by a modern piece that matched Katherine's aesthetic, rather than the home's colonial character. "I've moved some things around to make navigation safer," Katherine explained, noticing Eleanor's gaze. "The doctor mentioned confusion can be an issue during recovery." Eleanor nodded vaguely, but her mind catalogued each change with scholarly precision. Her home was being systematically erased and replaced, just as Katherine was attempting to do with her. Grace helped Eleanor settle in the sunroom while Katherine made a show of preparing tea. Through the archway, Eleanor could see her opening cabinets with increasing irritation, clearly unfamiliar with the kitchen's organization. Another telling detail. Katherine had been rearranging Eleanor's home without actually living in it. The telephone rang, and Katherine abandoned the tea preparation to answer it. From her position, Eleanor could see Katherine's expression shift as she checked the caller ID. "No, she's not available right now," Katherine said smoothly into the receiver. "Yes, I'll tell her you called, Vera. She's quite tired today." She hung up without taking a message, confirming Eleanor's suspicion that her friend's previous calls had been intercepted. The front door opened, and Michael's voice called out. Katherine's transformation was immediate and remarkable, like watching an actress step into a spotlight. Her posture straightened, her movements became more flowing, her expression softened into one of tender concern. "We're in the sunroom, honey," she called back. "Your mother's just getting settled." Michael appeared in the doorway, his face showing the careful neutrality Eleanor had grown accustomed to since Robert's death. "Mom," he said with formal warmth, approaching to kiss her cheek. "Good to have you home. I was just about to go over Mom's medication schedule with Grace," Katherine explained, guiding Michael to sit beside her on the love seat across from Eleanor. The doctor was quite specific about the regimen. Eleanor watched Katherine withdraw a printed schedule from a folder, noting how she positioned herself as the authority on Eleanor's care. Michael nodded along, asking no questions as Katherine detailed which medications might cause confusion, fatigue, or disorientation. "We'll need to monitor for side effects," Katherine explained to Grace. "Eleanor's been experiencing some memory issues even before the pneumonia." Eleanor recognized the masterful way Katherine was building her narrative. Each supposed symptom created plausible deniability for anything Eleanor might say that contradicted Katherine's version of reality. "I'll keep careful notes," Grace replied, accepting the medication chart with a professional nod. When Michael left for a business dinner an hour later, the shift in Katherine was subtle but unmistakable. Her voice lost its warmth, her gestures became more abrupt, and she stopped making eye contact with Eleanor entirely. "I'll be in the study," she informed Grace. "She usually naps around now. Call if there's any trouble." She spoke as if Eleanor weren't present, another calculated reminder of Eleanor's supposed diminishment. Once Katherine had gone, Grace helped Eleanor to her bedroom. Eleanor maintained her performance, moving slowly and appearing slightly disoriented, but watching Grace's reactions carefully. "Would you like me to help you find something more comfortable to wear, Mrs. Morrison?" Grace asked, opening the closet door. Eleanor noted that her wardrobe had also been culled, the tailored slacks and blouses she preferred replaced with shapeless loungewear that reinforced the image of an elderly invalid. "My blue cardigan," Eleanor mumbled, deliberately pointing to the wrong drawer. Grace opened it, finding nothing but socks. "I don't see a cardigan here, Mrs. Morrison. Let me check the others." While Grace's back was turned, Eleanor quickly glanced at the bedside table drawers, finding them partially open. Someone had been searching through her personal items. "Here we are," Grace said, retrieving the cardigan from another drawer. She helped Eleanor into it. Their eyes met briefly, and Eleanor allowed a moment of clear lucidity to show in her gaze before clouding it over again with fabricated confusion. Something flickered across Grace's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. She said nothing, but her movements became more deliberate, as if she were reassessing the situation. That evening, Katherine orchestrated an elaborate family dinner, ostensibly to celebrate Eleanor's return home. The performance was flawless. Solicitous inquiries about Eleanor's comfort, careful cutting of Eleanor's food as if she couldn't manage herself, gentle corrections when Eleanor deliberately misremembered minor details. "No, Mom," Katherine would say with practiced patience. "That was last Christmas, not this one. Remember? We discussed this yesterday." Eleanor noticed Michael's growing discomfort with each exchange, but he defaulted to his lifelong pattern of conflict avoidance, nodding along with Katherine's version of events rather than questioning the discrepancies. Later, as Grace helped her prepare for bed, Eleanor heard the telephone ring again. Through her partially open door, she saw Grace glance toward the sound, then back at Eleanor with a thoughtful expression. "Your friend Vera has called several times," Grace said quietly, adjusting Eleanor's pillows. "Mrs. Katherine mentioned you might be too tired for calls." Eleanor maintained her facade, mumbling something incoherent, but she registered the way Grace emphasized Mrs. Katherine rather than your daughter-in-law. As Grace turned down the bedside lamp, she paused, slipping something under Eleanor's pillow with a motion so smooth it might never have happened. "Sleep well, Mrs. Morrison," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "I'll check on you during the night." After Grace left, Eleanor waited 10 minutes before carefully retrieving the folded note from beneath her pillow. In neat, precise handwriting were 2 sentences. "Vera asked me to tell you she's worried. My phone is unlocked in the kitchen drawer if you need it." Eleanor stared at the note for a long moment, her mind racing. In Grace, she might have found an unexpected ally. Or this could be an elaborate trap set by Katherine to test her lucidity. The choice to trust was terrifying, but Eleanor recognized it as the first real choice she'd had in months. She tucked the note into her journal and closed her eyes, planning her next move in a game where the stakes were nothing less than her remaining years of life. Eleanor waited 3 days before making her first calculated risk. During that time, she observed Grace, the careful way she documented medications, her gentle efficiency, and, most tellingly, how her expression changed when Katherine spoke about Eleanor's condition versus when they were alone together. On the 4th morning after her return home, when Katherine announced she had a hair appointment followed by lunch with friends, Eleanor seized her opportunity. The moment Katherine's BMW disappeared down the driveway, she let her carefully maintained mask of confusion slip. "Grace," she said, her voice suddenly clear and articulate, "I believe we need to talk." Grace turned from arranging pillows on the sunroom chaise, her expression revealing minimal surprise, confirmation that she had indeed recognized Eleanor's performance. "I was wondering when you might decide to trust me, Mrs. Morrison," she said quietly, sitting down in the adjacent chair. "The medication confusion act was convincing, but your eyes track things too precisely when you think no one's watching." Eleanor felt a surge of relief mixed with wariness. "How much has Katherine told you about my decline?" "Quite a detailed narrative," Grace replied, her voice professionally neutral but her eyes warm. "She described progressive dementia symptoms beginning shortly after your husband passed. According to her, you've been experiencing increased confusion, memory lapses, and occasional paranoia." "And what do you observe?" Eleanor asked, watching Grace's face carefully. "I observe a woman who remembers exactly which medications she's supposed to take and when, who notes when objects in her home have been moved, and who modulates her performance of confusion depending on who's in the room." Grace's expression softened. "I've seen elder manipulation before, Mrs. Morrison. My grandmother experienced something similar from my uncle." Eleanor exhaled slowly, the tension she'd been carrying loosening slightly. "I need to speak with my friend Vera. Katherine has been intercepting her calls for months." Grace nodded, rising to retrieve her cell phone from the kitchen drawer. "Use this. I'll keep watch." Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she dialed Vera's number, not from weakness but from a rush of adrenaline at this small reclamation of independence. Vera answered on the 2nd ring. "Grace, is everything all right?" "It's Eleanor," she said, her voice catching unexpectedly. Until this moment, she hadn't realized how desperately she'd missed her friend's voice. "Eleanor!" Vera's tone held relief and concern in equal measure. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Katherine keeps saying you're too tired or confused for calls." "I've recently discovered that's been happening," Eleanor replied carefully, mindful of Grace standing watch at the window. "Could you come by tomorrow? Katherine has a charity committee meeting from 11 to 2. "I'll be there at 11. Sharp," Vera promised. "And Eleanor. I have concerns about some legal matters we should discuss." After ending the call, Eleanor returned the phone to Grace, noting the younger woman's approving nod. "Thank you," Eleanor said simply. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm here because I care about proper elder care," Grace replied. "What I'm observing doesn't align with ethical practices." The next morning, Katherine made a show of reviewing care instructions with Grace before leaving for her meeting, emphasizing Eleanor's supposed need for afternoon rest. "She gets quite confused if her routine is disrupted," Katherine explained, her tone suggesting professional concern while her eyes conveyed warning. Precisely 15 minutes after Katherine left, Vera's sensible sedan pulled into the driveway. Eleanor watched her old friend emerge, still straight-backed and energetic at 70, her silver hair cut in a practical bob, her movements conveying the same purposeful efficiency that had made her a formidable attorney. Grace welcomed Vera at the door and discreetly withdrew to the kitchen, giving the friends privacy while remaining within call range. "You look perfectly lucid to me," Vera declared after embracing Eleanor. "Although thinner than you should be." "The pneumonia took its toll," Eleanor admitted. "But my mind is intact, despite what Katherine has been telling people." Vera's expression darkened. "I suspected as much. Eleanor, I've been practicing elder law for 30 years. What you're describing has all the hallmarks of systematic isolation and manufactured incapacity." Eleanor gestured toward the wingback chair opposite her. "Tell me what you know." "Timothy Wells called me 2 weeks ago," Vera explained, her voice low despite their privacy. "He was concerned about changes Katherine was requesting to your estate planning documents. When he suggested consulting you directly, she claimed you were experiencing significant cognitive decline and that Michael had medical power of attorney." Eleanor felt her blood run cold. "Which he doesn't." "Not yet," Vera confirmed, but Timothy said Katherine presented some preliminary paperwork suggesting the process had begun. He was skeptical, but obligated to investigate. "She's been steadily removing my access to people who might contradict her narrative," Eleanor said, the pattern now crystal clear. "First friends, then financial records, now legal representation." "It's textbook," Vera nodded grimly. "Create isolation, manufacture evidence of decline, then assume control of assets." She leaned forward. "Eleanor, Timothy is too professionally cautious to intervene without concrete evidence. We need to document what's happening." Their conversation was interrupted by Grace appearing at the doorway. "Mrs. Morrison, I've found something concerning," she said, holding up an unmarked pill bottle. "These were mixed in with your prescribed medications, but they don't match anything on Dr. Chen's list." Vera took the bottle, examining the small, white tablets. "I'm taking these with me," she said decisively. "My nephew is a pharmacist. We'll identify them immediately." As Vera prepared to leave, she pressed a small object into Eleanor's hand. "A prepaid cell phone," she explained quietly. "Keep it hidden. My number is programmed in." The freedom of having direct connection to the outside world buoyed Eleanor's spirits in the following days. She maintained her performance of mild confusion and physical weakness while secretly documenting Katherine's manipulations in a journal she kept hidden behind the loose baseboard in her bathroom. It was during one of Katherine's shopping expeditions the following week that Eleanor ventured into the garden alone, drawn by the spring sunshine and the need to reclaim some part of her domain. She was pruning her beloved roses, movements slow but purposeful, when a voice spoke from the neighboring property. "Those Shakespeare roses are magnificent. The fragrance carries clear across the yard." Eleanor turned to see a tall, white-haired man standing at the low stone wall separating their properties. His face was weathered but kind, blue eyes alert with intelligence beneath bushy brows. "They were my husband's pride," Eleanor replied, deliberately allowing her natural articulation to surface. "I'm Eleanor Morrison." "Owen Jacobs," he replied with a small bow. I moved in 3 months ago but haven't had the pleasure of meeting you until now. I've been indisposed, Eleanor said carefully, assessing this new variable in her carefully constructed performance. So I gathered from conversations with your daughter-in-law, Owen replied, his tone neutral but his eyes observant. She mentioned cognitive challenges. Eleanor met his gaze directly. Did she indeed? Something in Owen's expression shifted, a journalist's recognition of a story beneath the surface. Interesting, he said softly. Because you speak with remarkable clarity for someone described as having significant memory issues. Their conversation was cut short by the sound of tires on the driveway. Katherine's BMW pulled up, and Eleanor immediately adjusted her posture, allowing her shoulders to slump and her expression to grow vague. Katherine emerged from the car with shopping bags, her stride faltering momentarily when she spotted Eleanor and Owen at the garden wall. Her recovery was swift, her public persona sliding into place as she approached. "Mother, you shouldn't be out here alone," she exclaimed, her voice pitched with concern that didn't reach her eyes. "You might fall." "We were just introducing ourselves," Owen explained, extending his hand. "Owen Jacobs. I moved into the Peterson place." "Eleanor Morrison," she replied, her smile tight. "I'm sorry if my mother-in-law has been bothering you. She sometimes wanders when her medication timing is off." Eleanor noted the flash of assessment in Owen's eyes as he glanced between them. "No bother at all," he said pleasantly. "We were discussing rose varieties. Mrs. Morrison seems quite knowledgeable." Katherine's smile stiffened further. "She has good days and bad days," she said, taking Eleanor's arm firmly. "Today must be a good day, but she tires easily. We should get you inside, Mother." As Katherine guided her toward the house, Eleanor glanced back to see Owen watching them, his expression thoughtful in a way that suggested he recognized the inconsistencies in the scene he'd just witnessed. That weekend, Michael and Katherine hosted a small family gathering, ostensibly to celebrate Eleanor's continued recovery. Eleanor used the opportunity to test Michael's awareness of Katherine's narrative manipulation. "Do you remember that summer in Maine when you were 14? She asked Michael during dinner, her voice deliberately stronger than the whisper she typically used around Katherine. "When you broke your arm falling from the neighbor's dock?" Michael smiled, momentarily, relaxing into the memory. "Of course. Dad was so worried, but you were completely calm, got me to the hospital in record time." "That wasn't Maine," Katherine interjected smoothly. "Eleanor, you're confusing it with the Cape House. You told me this story last month." Eleanor watched Michael's face carefully. "No," she said firmly. "It was definitely Maine. The Andersons' dock on Lake Sebago." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Michael's face as he looked between his wife and mother. "Actually," he said slowly, "Mom's right. It was Maine. The Cape House came later." Katherine's composure slipped for just a moment, a tightening around her eyes, a slight flush creeping up her neck. "Of course," she recovered quickly. "I must have misremembered." That night, as Grace helped her prepare for bed, she slipped Eleanor a note. "Found Katherine in your study going through your desk. Also, she's scheduled a meeting with Timothy Wells for Thursday. She hasn't mentioned it to you." Eleanor tucked the note into her hidden journal, her mind racing. Katherine was accelerating her timeline. The window for gathering evidence was closing rapidly. "Grace," she whispered, "I need to access my computer tomorrow while Katherine is at her lunch. There are financial records I need to find before it's too late." The moment Katherine's car disappeared down the driveway for her Wednesday lunch engagement, Eleanor's demeanor transformed. She straightened her shoulders, her movements becoming purposeful and precise as she made her way to the study with Grace following close behind. "I have 20 minutes before I need to take my actual medication," Eleanor said, settling at the desk chair. "Katherine usually extends these lunches, but we can't risk assumptions." Grace nodded, keeping watch at the window. Her calendar? Said lunch with Diane until 2 o'clock, but she's been returning early recently. Eleanor stared at her computer screen, momentarily hesitating at the login prompt. Robert had always handled their digital accounts, and after his death, Katherine had stepped in, claiming to simplify things for Eleanor. Do you remember the password? Grace asked gently. Katherine changed it months ago, Eleanor replied. But she doesn't know about Robert's system. She opened the desk drawer, removing a false bottom to reveal a small notebook. He kept backup passwords for everything. Said it was the professor in him, preparing for contingencies. Eleanor's fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, muscle, memory returning as she accessed her email account for the first time in nearly a year. What she found made her breath catch. Dozens of unread messages from friends she'd thought had abandoned her, notifications from financial institutions, and most damning of all, emails Katherine had sent from Eleanor's account. Look at this, Eleanor whispered, opening a folder labeled Drafts. Inside were messages Katherine had composed but never sent, practice runs for emails she'd eventually deliver, creating a digital trail of Eleanor's supposed decline. 2. Dr. Winters Berkshire Geriatric. Come from Eleanor Morrison East Link. Net subject. Concerning symptoms. Dr. Winters, I've been experiencing increasing confusion and memory lapses. Some days I cannot remember what I ate for breakfast or whether my son visited. I find myself getting lost in my own home and forgetting names of familiar objects. I'm frightened by these episodes and wonder if they might be early signs of dementia. My daughter-in-law Katherine has been managing my care and suggested I reach out. Eleanor felt a cold fury building as she scrolled through similar messages, to financial advisors, old colleagues, and even to Michael, all written in her name but crafted to reinforce the narrative of her cognitive decline. She's been systematically erasing me, Eleanor murmured, her academic mind cataloging the evidence even as her heart ached at the betrayal. Grace pointed to a subfolder labeled Accounts. Check that one, she suggested, her nursing professionalism giving way to the protectiveness Eleanor had glimpsed beneath. The folder contained correspondence with creditors, collection notices for gambling debts at Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods, threatening letters regarding overdue loan payments, and desperate negotiations for payment extensions. The amounts were staggering. She's been transferring funds from my investment accounts to cover these, Eleanor realized, finding evidence of multiple unauthorized wire transfers. Small enough amounts to not trigger immediate concerns, but over time. Mrs. Morrison, Grace said urgently, car coming up the drive. Eleanor quickly logged out, returning the notebook to its hiding place before assuming her practiced pose of gentle confusion. By the time Katherine entered the study, Eleanor appeared to be absently looking through a book of poetry, her expression carefully vacant. Mother? What are you doing in here? Katherine's voice held that familiar note of practiced concern tinged with irritation. The roses, Eleanor murmured vaguely. Looking for Robert's poem about the roses. Katherine's suspicion visibly eased as she turned to Grace. She shouldn't be in here unsupervised. There are too many things she could disturb. Or discover, Eleanor thought, maintaining her facade as Katherine guided her back to the sunroom. The following day brought Eleanor's follow-up appointment with Dr. Chen. Katherine insisted on accompanying her, maintaining a running commentary on Eleanor's good and bad days throughout the drive. In the examination room, Dr. Chen's professional demeanor revealed nothing as she reviewed Eleanor's vitals. The pneumonia has certainly improved, she noted. How are you feeling, Mrs. Morrison? Before Eleanor could respond, Katherine interjected. The confusion has been worse since she came home. Just yesterday she was wandering in the study, disoriented, and looking for poetry books that haven't been there for months. Dr. Chen made a note, her expression neutral. I'd like to examine Mrs. Morrison alone for a few minutes. Standard protocol. Would you mind waiting outside, Mrs. Morrison? Katherine hesitated before acquiescing with obvious reluctance. The moment the door closed, Dr. Chen's demeanor shifted subtly. "We have about 5 minutes," she said in a low voice. "Your physical recovery is progressing well, but I'm concerned about other aspects of your situation." Eleanor met the doctor's gaze directly. "As am I." "Your daughter-in-law has been contacting me regularly with reports of cognitive decline that don't align with my observations," Dr. Chen continued, her voice professional, but her eyes conveying deeper concern. "She's pushing for a dementia evaluation with a specialist who, coincidentally, has a reputation for being quick to declare incompetence." "Dr. Chen," Eleanor said carefully, "I need you to know that I am entirely lucid. The confusion Katherine reports is a performance I maintain for my own protection while I gather evidence of her financial exploitation." Dr. Chen nodded, unsurprised. "I suspected as much after our hospital interaction. My grandmother experienced similar manipulation from my aunt. I've been documenting the discrepancies between reported and observed symptoms." She glanced at the door. "Whatever you're doing, be careful. These situations can escalate quickly." When Katherine was invited back in, Dr. Chen maintained her professional distance while delivering her assessment. "Mrs. Morrison's recovery is proceeding normally. I see no need for specialized cognitive evaluation at this time." Katherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "But the confusion episodes can be side effects of the medication, Dr. A." Chen interrupted smoothly, "which we're adjusting today. Let's give that change 2 weeks before considering other interventions." That evening, Eleanor used the prepaid phone Vera had given her to call Owen Jacobs. Their brief garden interaction had revealed his background in investigative journalism, a resource too valuable to ignore. "Mr. Jacobs," she began when he answered, "this is Eleanor Morrison from next door. I believe you noticed some inconsistencies during our meeting." Owen's reply was immediate and direct. "I recognized a performance when I saw one, Mrs. Morrison. 30 years reporting teaches you to spot the gap between presented narrative and reality." Eleanor explained her situation concisely, her professor's ability to synthesize complex information serving her well. "Financial exploitation of elders is sadly common," Owen replied, his tone grave. "I exposed a similar scheme in Boston before retiring. With your permission, I'd like to look into Katherine's background." The following days brought disturbing revelations from multiple fronts. Owen discovered Katherine had left her previous community under suspicious circumstances, with rumors of financial improprieties involving an elderly neighbor whose home she had briefly shared. Meanwhile, Grace took the risk of photographing additional medication she found hidden in Katherine's bathroom, sedatives not prescribed to Eleanor, but matching the unmarked pills previously discovered. The most alarming development came when Vera arrived for another clandestine meeting while Katherine was out. "Timothy Wells called me yesterday," she reported, her expression grim. Katherine presented him with medical documentation, supposedly from Dr. Chen, detailing significant cognitive decline. When he questioned its legitimacy, she became agitated and mentioned finding another attorney who understands family loyalty better. "She's forging medical documents now," Eleanor said quietly, the weight of Katherine's determination settling over her. "That's not all," Vera continued. "I've discovered she's already made changes to your bank account access, adding herself as an authorized agent on 2 of your main accounts. The paperwork appears to have your signature." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "I never signed any such documents." That night, Eleanor used a small digital recorder Grace had purchased to document Katherine's true attitude toward her. Sitting in the family room with the device hidden beneath a cushion, she deliberately introduced topics Katherine found irritating: questions about finances, references to the past, inquiries about friends Katherine had blocked from contact. Katherine's facade cracked precisely as Eleanor had predicted. For God's sake, Eleanor, I've explained this to you 20 times, she snapped when Eleanor asked about missing jewelry. You gave those pieces to Michael for me last Christmas. You just don't remember. This is exactly why we're considering memory care facilities. Memory care? Eleanor asked, genuine alarm in her voice. But this is my home. And it's becoming increasingly clear you can't manage here, Katherine replied, her voice hard. Michael agrees with me, by the way. He's just too soft to tell you himself. Later, Eleanor played the recording for Grace, whose expression darkened with each dismissive, demeaning comment from Katherine. My grandmother's situation was similar, Grace confessed quietly. By the time we realized what my uncle was doing, he'd liquidated her savings and convinced everyone she was incompetent. That's why I recognize the signs with you. I've seen this playbook before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Eleanor reached for Grace's hand, momentarily overcome by the authentic human connection after months of Katherine's performative care. We need to move quickly, Grace continued, her voice strengthening with resolve. Katherine's planning something. I overheard her on the phone yesterday, telling someone that the situation will be resolved within 2 weeks. Eleanor nodded, her academic mind organizing the evidence they'd gathered into a coherent strategy. It's time to move from defense to offense, she said, the literature professor's love of narrative structure asserting itself. Every villain has a vulnerability. Katherine's is that she thinks I'm already defeated. As Grace helped her to bed that night, Eleanor reviewed their findings, searching for connections between disparate pieces of information. Just before drifting off to sleep, a disturbing thought surfaced. If Katherine had attempted this scheme before, as Owen's investigation suggested, who else might currently be in her sights? Her name was Evelyn Mercer, Owen said, his voice low as he and Eleanor sat in her garden, strategically positioned to appear as nothing more than friendly, neighbors chatting. Katherine had gone to her weekly hair appointment, leaving Grace to monitor Eleanor's confusion. She was 73, widowed, comfortable financially from her husband's insurance and investments, Owen continued, passing Eleanor a manila folder disguised inside a gardening magazine. Katherine befriended her at church in Stamford, Connecticut, about 5 years ago. Eleanor opened the folder carefully, her academic's eye methodically scanning the newspaper clippings and printed emails Owen had gathered. The pattern was undeniable. Katherine had ingratiated herself with the older woman, gradually assuming control of her finances and isolating her from friends and family. What happened to her? Eleanor asked quietly. She died before Katherine's plan fully materialized, Owen replied, his weathered face grave. Heart attack. The investigation afterward revealed financial irregularities, but by then Katherine had already moved away. The family suspected foul play but couldn't prove anything. Eleanor closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly, not from weakness but from cold rage. She's done this before. She'll do it again if she isn't stopped. Owen's blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, which is precisely why we're going to stop her. The quiet determination in his voice carried the weight of his years exposing corruption. I've been making calls to former colleagues at the Boston Globe. Katherine left a trail of suspicious relationships with wealthy elderly individuals before meeting Michael. Their conversation was interrupted by Grace approaching from the house, her face carefully composed for any watching eyes, but her stride purposeful. Mrs. Morrison, she said, I thought you might want to know I found several of your belongings in the trunk of Katherine's car this morning while retrieving your prescription. Antique silver and some jewelry. Eleanor nodded, processing this new information. She's liquidating smaller assets first, items whose absence might be attributed to my confusion rather than theft. Later that afternoon, Eleanor made her way to Robert's study under the pretense of looking for a book. While Grace kept watch, she examined the built-in shelves where her husband's first edition collection had been housed. Nearly a third of the volumes were missing now, books worth thousands each to the right collectors. A search through the ornate desk revealed more disturbing evidence. In a hidden compartment Robert had shown her years ago, Eleanor found blank. Sheets of paper with her signature clearly practiced at the bottom, Katherine's approximation improving with each attempt. Eleanor photographed these forgery attempts with the small camera Vera had provided, her hands steady despite the violation she felt. This was no longer abstract. This was the systematic erasure of her life and legacy. As she replaced the papers, she heard the unmistakable sound of Michael's voice in the foyer. Katherine wasn't expected back for hours. This was an unprecedented opportunity. Eleanor quickly assumed her practiced pose of mild confusion, shuffling into the hallway as Michael set his briefcase down. "Mom," he said, surprised. "I thought you'd be resting. Where's Katherine?" "Hair appointment," Eleanor murmured, deliberately slurring slightly. Then, watching his face carefully, she added, "She takes such good care of everything now. All the finances, the house decisions, everything." Something flickered across Michael's face. Discomfort, perhaps, or the first seeds of doubt. "Yes, well, she's always been organized." Eleanor gestured toward the study. "Your father's books. Did you take some? So many are missing." Michael frowned. "What books are missing? I haven't taken anything." "First editions," Eleanor said, allowing her voice to strengthen slightly. "Hemingway? Fitzgerald? Worth quite a lot." Michael's frown deepened as he followed Eleanor into the study, surveying the shelves. "I didn't realize. Katherine mentioned donating some books to the library, but I didn't know she meant Dad's collection." Eleanor saw her opening. "Michael," she said, dropping the pretense of frailty entirely. "We need to talk about Katherine, about what she's been doing." Michael's body language immediately changed, his shoulders tensing as he retreated emotionally. "Mom, we've been through this. Your confusion episodes are getting more frequent. Katherine's just trying to manage everything for your benefit." "There is no confusion, Michael," Eleanor stated firmly. "It's a performance I maintain for my safety while I gather evidence." Michael's expression shuddered. "This is exactly what Dr. Chen warned might happen. Paranoid ideation, conspiracy theories about caretakers. It's part of the cognitive decline." Eleanor felt the heartbreak of his blindness, like a physical pain. This brilliant boy she'd raised, who had once questioned everything, now unable to see what was directly before him. "Your father's watch," she said suddenly. "The Patek Philippe he left specifically to you. Have you seen it recently?" Michael's hand went instinctively to his wrist where the watch should have been. "Katherine said you were keeping it in the safe until my birthday." "Go look in the safe, Michael," Eleanor urged. "The combination is still your birthday. See? For yourself." For a moment, she thought he might actually do it, might take that first step toward truth. Instead, he glanced at his phone and shook his head. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes. We can discuss this another time, when Katherine is here to help explain things clearly." He leaned down to kiss her cheek, his touch perfunctory. "Get some rest, Mom." After he left, Eleanor allowed herself one moment of grief for the relationship that Katherine had poisoned. Then she straightened her shoulders and returned to the work of reclaiming her life. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Timothy Wells called while Katherine was in the shower, his usually measured voice tight with concern. "Mrs. Morrison," he began formally, "I'm calling about some documents recently submitted to my office. There are concerning discrepancies in the signatures that I feel ethically obligated to investigate." Eleanor dropped all pretense. "They're forgeries, Timothy. Katherine is attempting to gain control of my estate through falsified documents." The attorney's brief silence conveyed his professional caution. "Mrs. Morrison, these are serious allegations. If true, they constitute elder abuse and fraud." "I have evidence," Eleanor replied. Vera Santos has been helping me document Katherine's actions. Vera mentioned concerns, Timothy admitted. I'm required to verify your capacity, independently before proceeding. Could you meet me at my office? Without Katherine's knowledge, of course. This conversation was followed by another call, this one from Dr. Chen, who had completed her review of Eleanor's medical records. Someone accessed your electronic file and attempted to add notes about cognitive decline, she reported. The system flagged it because the access came from an unauthorized IP address, not from within our medical center. Katherine, Eleanor confirmed. I've documented the unauthorized access and added my own observations contradicting the false reports, Dr. Chen continued. Mrs. Morrison, I believe your situation is escalating toward a crisis point. The doctor's warning proved prophetic later that afternoon. Eleanor was in the sunroom with Grace, reviewing the evidence they'd gathered, when Katherine returned home unexpectedly from what should have been a charity luncheon. Her designer dress was impeccable, but her eyes held the slightly glassy quality Eleanor had come to recognize as post-gambling tension. Katherine froze in the doorway, taking in the scene. Eleanor fully upright, speaking articulately with Grace, papers spread between them that were hastily gathered as she entered. What's this? Katherine asked, her voice dangerously soft. Eleanor had no choice but to accelerate her timeline. Grace was helping me organize some old photographs, she said, allowing a deliberate tremor to enter her voice. Katherine's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting to Grace with new suspicion. Michael and I are considering a live-in facility for you, Eleanor, she said abruptly. This arrangement isn't working anymore. A facility? Eleanor injected the right note of confusion and fear into her voice. But this is my home. And it's becoming dangerous for you to live here, Katherine replied smoothly, the mask of concern sliding back into place. Your confusion episodes are increasing. Just yesterday you accused me of taking Robert's books, remember? The calculated gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. That evening, as Grace helped Eleanor prepare for bed, she noticed new pills had been added to her medication tray. These weren't prescribed by Dr. Chen, Grace whispered, showing Eleanor the small blue tablets. They look like sedatives, much stronger than your regular medication. Eleanor nodded grimly. She's accelerating her timeline. The confrontation frightened her. After Grace left, Eleanor used her hidden phone to call Vera, explaining the day's developments. Katherine mentioned a care facility, she concluded. I believe she's planning to have me declared incompetent. This matches what my sources tell me, Vera replied, her attorney's voice grim. She's scheduled an evaluation with Dr. Marcus Feinberg. He's known for quickly declaring elderly patients incompetent, usually after a single visit. When? Eleanor asked, her heart racing despite her outward calm. Next Tuesday, Vera answered. Eleanor, once he makes that determination, Katherine can move for emergency guardianship. We need to act before that appointment. Eleanor ended the call, her mind working with the strategic precision that had made her a renowned scholar. Katherine believed she was dealing with a confused, fragile old woman. That misperception was Eleanor's greatest weapon. But the window of opportunity was closing rapidly. As she hid the phone back in its secure place, Eleanor spotted something she'd missed before, a brochure that had fallen behind her nightstand. Retrieving it, she felt her blood run cold. Peaceful Pines Memory Care, where dignity meets compassionate. Supervision. The facility was 3 states away, far from any allies Eleanor had gathered. Once there, under heavy sedation, her chances of fighting back would be virtually non-existent. Eleanor returned the brochure to where she'd found it, her resolve hardening. Katherine had revealed her endgame. Now Eleanor had just 5 days to prevent it. Eleanor knew something was wrong the moment Katherine entered her bedroom with that particular smile, the one that never reached her eyes. It was Saturday morning, 3 days before the scheduled Evaluation with Dr. Feinberg. "I've been thinking about our care arrangements," Katherine announced, perching on the edge of Eleanor's bed with rehearsed casualness. "Grace has been wonderful, but I'm concerned about the financial strain. After all, your medical expenses have been quite substantial lately." Eleanor maintained her facade of mild confusion while inwardly cataloging the lie. Her insurance covered nearly all her medical costs, and Robert had left more than enough to handle any additional expenses. "I've decided to reduce Grace's hours," Katherine continued, "just until things stabilize. I'll be taking over more of your care personally." The calculated cruelty of this move was breathtaking. Katherine was systematically removing Eleanor's strongest ally, leaving her isolated and vulnerable before the crucial evaluation. "But Grace helps with my medications," Eleanor murmured, deliberately slurring her words slightly. "I'm perfectly capable of managing your medications, Mother," Katherine replied, her tone hardening fractionally. "In fact, Dr. Feinberg suggested simplifying things might reduce your confusion." Eleanor noted the deliberate mention of the psychiatrist. Katherine was establishing his authority in Eleanor's care despite never having met him. The acceleration of her timeline was alarming. That afternoon, while Katherine was making calls, in the study, Eleanor used her hidden phone to contact Grace. "She's isolating me before the evaluation," Eleanor explained quietly. "Without witnesses, she can claim whatever behavior she wants." "I anticipated this," Grace replied, her voice steady and determined. "There's a loose stone in the garden, wall facing Mr. Jacobs's property. I'll leave notes there daily, and I can still visit when Katherine's out. I made a copy of the spare key last week." The methodical way Grace had prepared for this eventuality made Eleanor profoundly grateful for the younger woman's foresight. With Grace officially removed from the house, Katherine grew bolder. She began administering Eleanor's medication personally, watching until Eleanor swallowed each pill. Unknown to Katherine, Eleanor had perfected the technique of holding the tablets under her tongue, spitting them out later when alone. On Sunday morning, Eleanor made her decisive move. Katherine had left briefly to pick up groceries, giving Eleanor a narrow window of opportunity. Moving quickly to the study, she retrieved the folder of financial documents she'd discovered during her computer investigation, placing it prominently on the coffee table in the living room. When Katherine returned, Eleanor sat waiting, her posture straight, all pretense of confusion abandoned. "What are you doing out of bed?" Katherine asked sharply, setting down the groceries. Then her gaze fell on the folder, and her expression froze. "Where did you get those?" "From my computer," Eleanor replied, her voice clear and strong. "The one you thought I couldn't access. The documents show quite a pattern, Katherine. Unauthorized transfers from my accounts, emails forged. In my name, communication with creditors about gambling debts." Katherine's transformation was immediate and chilling. The mask of concerned daughter-in-law fell away completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice flat. "Those documents will simply confirm what I've been telling everyone, that you're experiencing paranoid delusions as part of your cognitive decline." "The bank records are quite real," Eleanor countered, "as are the forged signatures Timothy Wells identified." A flash of uncertainty crossed Katherine's face before her expression hardened again. "Timothy works for the family, for Michael, and Michael trusts me implicitly." "Does he know about the Mohegan Sun debts? Or Evelyn Mercer in Stamford?" Eleanor asked quietly. Katherine's face paled slightly at the mention of her previous victim. "You've been busy," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "But it won't matter. By Wednesday, you'll be settled in Peaceful Pines, properly medicated, and nobody will believe a word you say." "Is that what happened to Evelyn?" Eleanor asked. "Was she getting too close to exposing you?" Katherine moved closer, her pretense completely abandoned now. "Evelyn had a heart condition. Very sad. As for you, Eleanor, you're having increasingly frequent episodes of paranoia and confusion. Everyone has witnessed it. Your son, your doctors, your friends. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected daughter-in-law who's sacrificed to care for you, or a grieving widow with dementia? I've been recording our conversations, Eleanor said quietly, including this one. Katherine's expression flickered briefly before she laughed. No one will ever hear those recordings. Did you think I wouldn't search your room? I found your little phone last night. Eleanor's heart sank, but she maintained her composure. She'd suspected Katherine might find the phone eventually, which is why she'd given Vera copies of all her evidence days earlier. You've underestimated me from the beginning, Eleanor said, rising to her feet. That was your mistake. Katherine's face contorted with barely controlled rage. No, Eleanor. Your mistake was thinking you could outsmart me. Michael signed the preliminary guardianship papers yesterday. He believes you need specialized care that I simply can't provide anymore. The betrayal cut deep, despite Eleanor's intellectual understanding of Michael's manipulation. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Katherine's mask slid back into place with practiced ease. That will be the pharmacy delivery. Don't go anywhere, Eleanor. We haven't finished our conversation. The moment Katherine left the room, Eleanor moved quickly to the kitchen phone, dialing Michael's cell number. When his voicemail answered, she abandoned her carefully controlled facade, allowing genuine emotion to color her voice. Michael, it's Mom. Katherine is planning to have me committed to a memory care facility against my will. The cognitive decline she's been describing to you is fabricated. Please, son, come to the house. See for yourself. Before it's too late. She had just hung up when Katherine returned, a white pharmacy bag in hand. Her expression made it clear she'd heard enough of the message to understand what Eleanor had done. That was unfortunate, Katherine said coldly, but ultimately futile. I'll simply delete the message before Michael hears it. And now I think you need your medication. You're clearly having an episode. Eleanor backed away as Katherine advanced with a glass of water and 2 pills, neither matching Eleanor's prescribed medication. I won't take those, Eleanor stated firmly. You don't have a choice anymore, Katherine replied, her voice hardening as she moved closer. The confrontation was interrupted by another ring of the doorbell, more insistent this time. Katherine hesitated, clearly frustrated by the disruption. This isn't over, she warned, setting down the pills and moving toward the foyer. Eleanor heard Katherine's exclamation of surprise, followed by Dr. Chen's professional voice. Good afternoon, Mrs. Morrison. I received a concerning call from Grace about changes to Eleanor's medication. I thought an in-person evaluation was warranted. Katherine's response was coldly polite. That won't be necessary. Grace is no longer employed here precisely because she was interfering with Eleanor's treatment plan. Nevertheless, as Mrs. Eleanor Morrison's physician of record, I have an obligation to examine her, Dr. Chen replied, her tone brooking no argument. As they entered the living room, Eleanor saw Grace standing slightly behind Dr. Chen, her expression determined despite her evident nervousness. Dr. Chen, Eleanor said clearly, I'm glad you're here. Katherine was just about to administer medication that doesn't match my prescriptions. Katherine's laugh was a perfect blend of concern and exasperation. You see what we're dealing with? These paranoid episodes are becoming more frequent. Eleanor is convinced I'm trying to poison her. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral as she set down her medical bag. May I see the medication in question? Before Katherine could respond, the front door opened again, and Michael's voice called out from the foyer. Mom? Katherine? What's going on? I got a strange message. He appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with evident confusion. Dr. Chen's unexpected presence, Grace standing nervously by the wall, Eleanor fully lucid and upright, Katherine's barely concealed tension. Michael, Katherine began, her voice instantly transforming into one of relieved concern. Thank goodness you're here. Your mother is having another episode. Dr. Chen just arrived to help. Eleanor met her son's eyes directly. Check my phone records, Michael. See who I've actually been calling. Check your father's safe for his watch. Look at the medication Katherine was about to give me compared to my actual prescriptions. Michael's gaze moved between his mother and wife, uncertainty clear in his expression for the first time. She's confused, darling, Katherine insisted, moving to take his arm. Remember what Dr. Feinberg said about these episodes? I've never met Dr. Feinberg, Eleanor interrupted firmly. He's the psychiatrist Katherine has arranged to declare me incompetent on Tuesday, after which she plans to move me to a memory care facility 3 states away. That's absurd, Katherine scoffed, but her composure was cracking. Michael, you know we've discussed Peaceful Pines as a possibility if Mom's condition deteriorated. I don't recall discussing any facility named Peaceful Pines, Michael said slowly, his expression troubled. The tension in the room was palpable, as Michael looked between the 4 women, decades of conflict avoidance warring with the evidence before his eyes. Perhaps, Dr. Chen suggested carefully, we should examine the medication Mrs. Morrison mentioned. Michael nodded, moving towards the pills Katherine had left on the table. As he reached for them, Katherine's control finally shattered. Don't touch those, she snapped, lunging to intercept him. The abrupt movement, so at odds with her carefully maintained image, caused Michael to recoil in surprise. He stared at his wife as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Eleanor watched the realization dawn in her son's eyes, the first crack in the foundation of his denial. In that moment, despite the danger still surrounding her, Eleanor felt a profound sense of validation. Being seen, truly seen, after months of invisibility, was its own form of liberation. The confrontation had begun, and there would be no going back to the careful performances that had defined their family dynamic for too long. The morning after. The confrontation brought a strange, tense calm to the Morrison home. Michael had insisted on staying overnight, sleeping in his old bedroom while Katherine returned to their house across town, citing a need for space to process. Now he sat across from Eleanor at the breakfast table, his face drawn from a sleepless night. I need to understand exactly what's happened, he said finally, his voice hollow. All of it. Eleanor studied her son's face, the familiar features now haunted by doubt. This was the conversation she'd longed for, yet now that it had arrived, she felt an unexpected wave of compassion for his pain. Katherine has been systematically working to gain control of my estate, she began quietly, her academic mind organizing the facts with precision. She's isolated me from friends, manufactured evidence of cognitive decline, and attempted to manipulate my medication. Michael winced at each point but didn't interrupt. Eleanor continued, outlining the financial transfers, the forgeries, the altered medical records. As she spoke, she retrieved the folder of evidence she'd compiled, spreading documents across the kitchen table like artifacts from an archaeological dig, each piece revealing a fragment of Katherine's deception. I don't want to believe this, Michael said finally, his voice cracking slightly. But I saw her face yesterday when I reached for those pills. I've never seen her look like that before. Before Eleanor could respond, the doorbell rang. Michael answered it, returning moments later with Katherine, whose transformation was remarkable. Gone was the cold calculation of yesterday, replaced by a woman who appeared vulnerable, exhausted, and deeply hurt. Eleanor, she began, her voice trembling perfectly. I understand you're upset about the care decisions we've been considering, but these accusations, they're breaking Michael's heart. Eleanor maintained her composure, watching Katherine's performance with the detached analysis of a literature professor dissecting a text. The careful choice of words, the strategic use of tears, the subtle positioning of herself as the victim, it was masterful. Michael, Katherine continued, turning to him with glistening eyes. Your mother has been in decline since your father died. Dr. Chen can confirm the cognitive issues. They're documented in her medical records. The records you altered, Eleanor interjected calmly. Katherine's expression shifted to one of pained patience. This paranoia is exactly what Dr. Feinberg warned us about. Grief can manifest as suspicion, especially in elderly patients. Your mother needs more care than I can provide, Michael. That's all this has ever been about. Eleanor watched doubt cloud Michael's expression again. Katherine's counter-narrative was compelling, especially to a man who'd spent decades avoiding uncomfortable truths. The bank records, Eleanor said quietly. The transfers to Mohegan, son, the gambling debts. Those aren't paranoid delusions, Michael. Katherine's response was immediate and tearful. I've been handling your mother's finances at her request. Any transfers were made with her knowledge, though she may not remember authorizing them now. As for gambling, yes, Michael. I occasionally visit the casino with friends. I've never hidden that from you. The practiced ease with which Katherine constructed alternative explanations was chilling. Eleanor saw Michael wavering, his lifetime of conflict avoidance battling against the evidence before him. Their impasse was interrupted by Eleanor suddenly pressing a hand to her chest, a wave of genuine dizziness washing over her. The stress of the confrontation, combined with her still recovering body, had finally exacted its toll. Mom? Michael was immediately at her side, concern etched across his face. Katherine moved with equal speed, her tone shifting to one of practiced medical authority. This is what happens when she gets agitated. I've been trying to protect her from exactly this kind of episode. Help me get her to the bedroom. Eleanor tried to protest, but the room tilted alarmingly as Michael and Katherine guided her down the hallway. Through her haze, she registered Katherine's quietly triumphant expression. This genuine health episode would become powerful evidence for her narrative of Eleanor's fragility. Once Eleanor was settled in bed, Katherine efficiently took charge, administering medication that Eleanor was too weak to refuse, drawing the curtains, and speaking in hushed tones to Michael outside the door. She needs rest now, Katherine's voice drifted through the partially open door. This is why I've been so concerned, Michael. These episodes are becoming more frequent. Eleanor fought against the sedative effect of whatever Katherine had given her, struggling to maintain consciousness. She heard Michael's voice, uncertain, but still deferential to Katherine's expertise. Maybe we should call Dr. Chen again, he suggested. I'll call her, Katherine assured him. Why don't you go get some coffee? You look exhausted. As Michael's footsteps receded, Katherine entered the bedroom, her compassionate mask slipping away as she leaned close to Eleanor's. "Ear, you see how easily he returns to trusting me?" she whispered. "By this evening, he'll be convinced this little rebellion of yours was just another confused episode, and you've helpfully demonstrated exactly why you need the specialized care I've arranged." Eleanor struggled to respond, but the medication pulled her inexorably toward unconsciousness. When she awoke hours later, the house was quiet. Grace sat beside her bed, having apparently returned during Eleanor's enforced sleep. Katherine left with Michael, Grace explained quietly. She's taking him to lunch to discuss options for your care. But Vera called. She's arranged an emergency meeting with Timothy Wells tomorrow morning, and Owen stopped by. Katherine tried to turn him away, but he refused to leave until he spoke to Michael directly. Eleanor nodded weakly, grateful for the network of allies who continued fighting while she couldn't. "My recorder," she whispered, "in the nightstand." Grace retrieved the small device, which Eleanor had managed to activate during her confrontation with Katherine that morning. Even sedated, she'd maintained the presence of mind to preserve evidence. The remainder of the day brought a cascade of revelations that gradually tilted the balance of power away from Katherine. Michael returned alone, his expression troubled, as he retreated to the home office to make calls. Eleanor later learned from Grace that he had contacted their bank directly, bypassing Katherine to inquire about recent transactions. By evening, Owen arrived with documentation of Katherine's previous entanglements with elderly victims, presenting it to Michael with the gentle but firm authority of a seasoned investigative journalist. Their low voices carried from the study, punctuated occasionally by Michael's sharp exclamations of disbelief. Katherine returned just as Owen was leaving, her carefully composed face faltering momentarily when she recognized him. Eleanor, having regained enough strength to sit in the living room, watched the subtle shift in Katherine's demeanor, the first signs of desperation breaking through her polished facade. "Who was that?" Katherine demanded of Michael, her voice straining for casualness. "Owen Jacobs, Mom's neighbor," Michael replied, his tone uncharacteristically direct. Former investigative reporter for the Boston Globe. He had some interesting information about a woman named Evelyn Mercer. Katherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I have no idea who that is." "That's strange," Michael continued, "because he has photos of you at her funeral in Stamford, before you and I met." The silence that followed was electric with tension. Katherine recovered quickly, constructing an explanation about a distant family connection. But Eleanor could see Michael's growing skepticism. The final blow came later that evening when Michael discovered documents hidden in a hollow book in their home office, credit card statements showing massive gambling debts, and desperate emails to loan sharks that Katherine had printed but never sent. "She tried to access your safe deposit box today," Vera reported by phone as Eleanor prepared for bed. "The bank called me because I'd placed an alert on your accounts. She had paperwork showing power of attorney, but the signature was obviously forged." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this news. "She's getting desperate." "Which makes her dangerous," Vera cautioned. "Don't underestimate what she might do when cornered." That night, as Eleanor drifted toward sleep, she heard the muffled sounds of Michael and Katherine arguing downstairs. Their voices rose and fell like distant thunder, occasionally punctuated by Katherine's theatrical sobs or sharp accusations. Eleanor didn't need to hear the specific words to understand the fundamental shift occurring in her home. The careful architecture of deception Katherine had constructed was collapsing, brick by brick, revealing the hollow foundation beneath the facade of family unity. Morning would bring the meeting with Timothy Wells, another step toward reclaiming her autonomy. But Eleanor understood that legal victory would not heal the emotional devastation Katherine had wrought. Michael was beginning the painful process of recognizing betrayal, while Eleanor faced the bittersweet reality that vindication came at the cost of her son's happiness. As she finally drifted to sleep, Eleanor heard a door slam downstairs, followed by the sound of a car engine starting. Through her window, she watched Katherine's BMW pull away into the darkness, its headlights cutting a determined path toward an uncertain destination. Katherine returned the following morning during Timothy Wells' visit, entering the house with the practiced poise of someone who believed completely in her own narrative. If the previous night's confrontation with Michael had shaken her, she showed no evidence of it as she greeted the attorney with perfect cordiality. "Timothy, what a surprise," she said, setting down her handbag on the entryway table. "I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled." Timothy Wells rose from his seat in the living room, his tall frame and formal demeanor lending gravity to the moment. "This isn't a scheduled appointment, Katherine. I'm here at Eleanor's request to discuss some concerning legal matters." Eleanor observed Katherine's minute reactions from her armchair, the slight narrowing of eyes, the almost imperceptible stiffening of her smile. Beside her, Vera sat with professional composure, a folder of documents neatly arranged on her lap. "I see," Katherine replied, her voice maintaining its pleasant tone. "Well, I'm glad I returned when I did. Eleanor's condition necessitates having a family advocate present during legal discussions." Timothy's expression remained neutral. "That's actually one of the matters we need to address. There seem to be discrepancies regarding Eleanor's cognitive status and certain documents submitted to my office." Katherine's gaze swept the room, noting Michael's absence. "Where's Michael?" "Upstairs," Eleanor replied, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Going through his father's papers." A flash of calculation crossed Katherine's face before she settled into a chair opposite Eleanor, arranging her expression into one of patient concern. "I understand there's been confusion, but I can explain everything." Before she could continue, Michael descended the stairs, holding a leather-bound journal. His expression was grim as he entered the living room, acknowledging the others with a brief nod. "I found this in your overnight bag," he said to Katherine, holding up the journal. "It's my mother's handwriting, but the entries don't make sense. They describe events that never happened: giving away jewelry, forgetting to turn off the stove, wandering outside at night." Eleanor felt a chill at this revelation. "May I see that?" she asked, extending her hand. As she examined the journal, Eleanor recognized her own penmanship, but not the content. Someone, Katherine, had methodically created false entries dating back months, each one documenting increasingly worrisome behavior. "I've never written these words," Eleanor said quietly. "This is my old journal, but these entries are forgeries." Katherine leaned forward, her expression a masterpiece of sympathetic concern. "Eleanor, you've been keeping that journal since Robert died. You often don't remember writing in it during your confused episodes." "Convenient," Vera commented, dryly opening her folder. "Timothy, I've compiled documentation of multiple instances where Katherine attempted to misrepresent Eleanor's mental state to financial institutions and medical providers." Timothy accepted the folder, reviewing its contents with professional thoroughness while Katherine maintained her performance of wounded concern. "These accusations are deeply hurtful," Katherine said, her voice catching perfectly on the words. "Everything I've done has been for Eleanor's well-being, and in accordance with the family's wishes." "That's not entirely accurate," Timothy replied, looking up from the documents. "I've found no legal basis for the power of attorney document you presented to First National Bank yesterday. The signature doesn't match Eleanor's on file, and there's no record of proper witnessing." Katherine's composure wavered slightly before she regained control. "There must be some misunderstanding. Michael and I discussed these arrangements months ago." "Did we?" Michael asked quietly, his voice holding an unfamiliar steel. "Because I have no memory of approving a power of attorney, and my signature on that document doesn't match my handwriting." The confrontation was interrupted by the doorbell. Grace, who had been observing silently from the kitchen doorway, went to answer it. She returned moments later with Dr. Chen, whose professional demeanor couldn't completely mask her concern. "I apologize for arriving unannounced," Dr. Chen said. "But after reviewing the medical records that were submitted to Peaceful Pines Care Facility, I felt it necessary to speak with everyone in person." Katherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "What records?" "Extensive documentation of advanced dementia symptoms that were supposedly observed during Eleanor's recent appointments with me," Dr. Chen replied, removing papers from her medical bag. "These reports carry my electronic signature, but I never wrote them. They've been fabricated." The momentum was shifting rapidly against Katherine, but Eleanor had learned not to underestimate her. As the confrontation continued, she noticed Katherine's hand dipping into her purse, surreptitiously texting someone. 20 minutes later, as Timothy was outlining the legal implications of forged documents, the doorbell rang again. Katherine's expression flickered with satisfaction as Grace went to answer it. "That will be Dr. Feinberg," Katherine announced. "I called him this morning, concerned about Eleanor's escalating paranoia. I thought an immediate evaluation would be in everyone's best interest." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If the psychiatrist found Eleanor in a highly agitated state, surrounded by lawyers and making accusations against family members, it would perfectly reinforce Katherine's narrative of deteriorating mental health. Eleanor felt her heart racing, dangerously as a wave of genuine physical distress washed over her. The stress of the confrontation was straining her still recovering body, creating precisely the physical symptoms that would support Katherine's claims. But rather than Dr. Feinberg, it was Owen Jacobs who entered the living room with Grace, his weathered face grave as he nodded greeting to the assembled group. "I apologize for interrupting," he said formally, "but I believe this information couldn't wait." He turned to Michael. "This morning I observed Katherine meeting with James Donovan at the Riverside coffee shop." The name clearly meant nothing to Michael, but Timothy Wells straightened in his chair. "James Donovan, the document specialist? The one who was disbarred last year for forgery?" Katherine's careful mask slipped momentarily, genuine alarm flashing across her features before she recovered. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never met anyone by that name." "I have photographs," Owen replied calmly, withdrawing an envelope from his jacket. "And Mr. Donovan was quite forthcoming when I approached him afterward and identified myself as a former investigative journalist with the Boston Globe. Apparently, he didn't realize he was being asked to forge medical documents." Eleanor observed the shifting dynamics with analytical clarity, despite her physical distress. Katherine was losing control of the narrative, her carefully constructed deception unraveling thread by thread. The final blow came from Grace, who had slipped away during the confrontation only to return with a sealed envelope. "I found this in the back of Mrs. Morrison's closet this morning, hidden in an old hat box," she said, handing it to Timothy. "It appears to be the original will with notarized signatures." As Timothy examined the document, Katherine's composure finally fractured completely. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, abandoning the concerned caretaker act entirely. "Eleanor is clearly manipulating all of you. Her condition has been documented by multiple professionals." "Professionals you paid or deceived," Vera countered, her attorney's voice crisp with certainty. Eleanor's vision began to blur at the edges, her breathing becoming labored as her body rebelled against the sustained stress. She gripped the arms of her chair, fighting to maintain consciousness as the confrontation reached its climax. Katherine noticed Eleanor's distress immediately, pivoting with predatory instinct. "Look at her," she said urgently to the room. "This is exactly what her episodes look like. She needs medical intervention, not legal harassment." Dr. Chen moved swiftly to Eleanor's side, her professional assessment quick and efficient. "This is a stress response, not a cognitive episode," she stated firmly, taking Eleanor's pulse. "I'm documenting this entire interaction for the medical record." As Dr. Chen attended to Eleanor, Michael approached Katherine, his expression a complex mixture of grief, anger, and dawning resolution. "It's over, Katherine," he said quietly. "I found your gambling receipts in our home office. The loan applications, using my mother's social security number. The emails to Peaceful Pines arranging for her to be heavily sedated during transport." Katherine's expression hardened, calculation replacing pretense. "You'll never prove intent," she said, her voice low enough that only Michael and those nearest could hear. "I'll claim I was acting in what I believed was her best interest." "One confused old woman's word against mine." "Not just her word," Owen said quietly, holding up a small recording device. "I've documented our entire conversation today, with everyone's knowledge except yours, including your last statement." Eleanor, fighting through her physical distress, watched the final transformation of her daughter-in-law, the mask of concern falling away completely to reveal the cold, desperate calculation beneath. In that unguarded moment, she saw Katherine for who she truly was, not a monster, but something more mundane and perhaps more dangerous, a person who had convinced herself that her own needs justified any action, no matter who was harmed in the process. Timothy Wells gathered his documents deliberately, his normally detached professional demeanor replaced by genuine moral outrage. "Katherine, based on the evidence presented today, I'm obligated to report apparent financial elder abuse to the authorities. I strongly advise you to retain separate legal counsel immediately." Catherine's gaze darted around the room, assessing options with the rapid calculation of someone accustomed to manipulating situations to her advantage. Finding no allies, she grabbed her purse and moved toward the door. "This isn't finished," she said, her voice cold. "Michael, don't expect to come home tonight or ever." After she left, the house fell into a strange silence, broken only by Dr. Chen's quiet medical instructions as she helped Eleanor regulate her breathing. The danger wasn't completely past. Eleanor's physical condition remained precarious, and Catherine's desperate final moves could still pose a threat, but the balance of power had shifted decisively. As Owen helped Eleanor to her bedroom to rest, his hand steady beneath her elbow, he murmured words meant only for her. "You fought when many would have surrendered. That kind of courage doesn't come along often in this world." Eleanor felt the weight of the compliment, understanding the depth of feeling behind Owen's carefully chosen words. In the midst of crisis, this unexpected connection offered a glimpse of what might exist beyond the immediate battle, a future she hadn't dared imagine during her darkest moments. But first, there would need to be a final reckoning. Catherine's parting words had made that clear. The discovery of forged documents had forced the crisis to its breaking point, setting the stage for a confrontation where all parties would finally have to acknowledge the truth, no matter how painful that recognition might be. 3 days passed before Katherine returned to Eleanor's home. They were days of quiet recovery and legal preparation, Timothy Wells methodically building a case while Dr. Chen monitored Eleanor's health. Michael moved into the guest room, spending hours alone in his father's study reviewing financial records with a forensic accountant Timothy had recommended. Grace maintained her vigilant care of Eleanor, while Owen visited daily, often bringing books or sitting quietly in the garden with her. Their companionship required no performance, no calculated responses, just the simple authenticity Eleanor had been denied for too long. On Thursday morning, Timothy Wells called to arrange a formal meeting. "Katherine has requested an opportunity to address the allegations," he explained. "I've advised against it without her lawyer present, but she's insisting. Michael thinks we should hear what she has to say." Eleanor agreed, understanding that true resolution required confronting, not avoiding, the painful truth. By afternoon, the living room had been transformed into an impromptu conference space. Timothy and Vera sat with legal documents arranged, neatly before them. Dr. Chen attended at Eleanor's request, both as medical support and witness. Owen positioned himself unobtrusively in the corner, his journalist's eye missing nothing. Michael paced by the window, his face drawn from sleepless nights and the emotional toll of disillusionment. When the doorbell rang, his body tensed visibly before he moved to answer it. Katherine entered like an actress taking the stage, dressed impeccably in a conservative blue suit that projected both authority and appropriate contrition. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup subtle enough to suggest she hadn't slept well, a calculated detail that wouldn't be lost on Michael. "Thank you all for agreeing to meet," she began, her voice carrying just the right note of emotional strain. "This situation has spiraled into something none of us intended, and I think we need to step back and remember we're family." Eleanor observed Catherine's performance with academic detachment. Even now, facing evidence of her crimes, Katherine was attempting to reframe the narrative, positioning herself not as perpetrator, but as equal participant in a family misunderstanding. Timothy Wells was having none of it. "Mrs. Morrison," he said formally, "let's be clear about why we're here. We have documented evidence of multiple forged signatures on legal and financial documents, unauthorized transfers from Eleanor's accounts, and falsified medical records. These are not family misunderstandings. They are potential felonies." Catherine's expression flickered briefly before settling into wounded dignity. "Michael," she said, turning to her husband with practiced vulnerability, "you know everything. I've done has been for us, for our future. Eleanor's condition has been deteriorating for months. I was trying to protect her assets, our family legacy, from her increasingly erratic decisions. Michael's face remained impassive, but Eleanor could see the conflict in his eyes. Katherine had been his partner for 15 years, the foundation of his adult life. Accepting the full truth meant acknowledging that foundation was built on quicksand. "The bank statements, Katherine," he said quietly. "Our joint accounts. The withdrawals to Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods. That wasn't about protecting anyone's assets." Katherine's strategy shifted instantly, her expression hardening with the realization that her initial approach wasn't working. "One weakness, Michael. Everyone has one. Mine is gambling. I've been working on it, seeing a therapist, but that has nothing to do with my care for Eleanor." "I have something you should hear," Eleanor interjected, nodding to Grace, who pressed play on the small digital recorder they had prepared. Katherine's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "You see how easily he returns to trusting me? By this evening, he'll be convinced this little rebellion of yours was just another confused episode, and you've helpfully demonstrated exactly why you need the specialized care I've arranged." Michael flinched visibly at the recording, hearing a version of his wife he'd never been allowed to see. Katherine's expression froze momentarily before she recovered, launching into an explanation about context and stress-induced poor word choices. But Eleanor wasn't finished. The recorder continued, playing another conversation from weeks earlier where Katherine had explicitly discussed her plans to have Eleanor declared incompetent. "That's enough!" Katherine snapped, her composure cracking. "These recordings are manipulated. They're inadmissible." "We're not in court yet," Vera replied calmly. "This is a family meeting, trying to resolve matters before they reach that point." Timothy opened a folder, removing bank statements that he passed to Michael. "These are the records from your joint accounts over the past year. The highlighted transactions show systematic emptying of funds. As of this morning, your primary savings account holds less than $200. Michael studied the documents, his expression growing increasingly grim. "Where did it go, Katherine? There's over $100,000 missing." Katherine's careful facade finally began to crumble under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking any ally or escape route. "Fine," she said, her voice hardening into something closer to her true self. "You want the truth? I needed that money. I have debts you know nothing about, debts that would have ruined us if I hadn't found a way to pay them." "By stealing from my mother," Michael stated flatly, "by accessing resources that were going to be ours eventually anyway." Katherine shot back, abandoning all pretense. "Your mother is sitting on a fortune while we've been struggling with mortgage payments and investment losses." Eleanor watched the ugly truth emerge like a creature long hidden in darkness. Katherine's resentment of her wealth, her impatience for inheritance, her calculation in every interaction, all laid bare in this moment of desperation. "Did you ever love him?" Eleanor asked quietly, the question cutting through Katherine's rationalizations. Katherine's laugh was brittle and cold. "Love? Is that what you think this is about? Do you know what I saw when I met Michael, Eleanor? I saw security, stability, the Morrison family name and the Morrison family money. Everything I never had growing up." Michael recoiled as if physically struck. "So our entire marriage was a practical arrangement," Katherine finished for him. "One that worked perfectly until your mother's meddling friends started turning her against me. I did what I had to do to protect what I'd spent 15 years building." The raw confession hung in the air, stripping away the last illusions anyone might have maintained about Katherine's motivations. Eleanor felt an unexpected wave of pity for this woman whose worldview was so transactional, so devoid of authentic connection. Michael sank into a chair, the full weight of his self-deception finally impossible to bear. "I let this happen," he said, his voice hollow. I saw the signs and chose to ignore them. Every time you dismissed Mom's concerns, every time you isolated her from friends, every time you made decisions without consulting her, I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. His honesty broke something open in the room, the first crack in the dam of unspoken truths that had separated mother and son for years. I failed you, Mom, Michael continued, meeting Eleanor's eyes directly for the first time in months. After Dad died, I should have been here. Instead, I handed everything over to Katherine because it was easier than facing my own grief. Eleanor reached for her son's hand, feeling the weight of his fingers as they closed around hers. We both retreated after Robert died, she acknowledged. We left space for Katherine to step between us. Katherine watched this reconciliation with growing fury, her calculated persona completely abandoned now. How touching, she sneered. Mother and son united against the evil interloper. Well, this isn't over. I still have rights as Michael's wife. Community property laws. Actually, Timothy interrupted smoothly. Given the evidence of financial exploitation and the documented forgeries, I believe the courts will view this quite differently. Katherine's eyes narrowed as she realized the extent of her exposure. With sudden determination, she grabbed her purse and stalked toward the hallway. I'm taking what's mine, she announced. Family heirlooms Michael promised me years ago. Owen moved with surprising speed for a man in his 70s, blocking her path to the master bedroom where Eleanor kept her most valuable jewelry. I don't think that would be wise, Mrs. Morrison, he said quietly. Katherine's transformation was complete now, her poised exterior giving way to raw desperation. She turned back to Michael, making one final attempt to reclaim control. 15 years, Michael. Are you really going to throw that away? Based on recordings that could easily have been edited? On the word of your confused mother and her convenient new friends? For a moment, Eleanor held her breath, understanding how deeply Katherine's manipulation had rooted itself in Michael's psyche. The pull of denial, of returning to the comfortable lie rather than facing the painful truth, would be powerful. Michael looked at his wife for a long moment, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. It's over, Katherine, he said simply. I've already filed a police report about the forgeries and contacted a divorce attorney. Katherine's face contorted with rage as she lunged toward Eleanor, as if attacking the older woman might somehow undo the collapse of her carefully constructed world. Vera moved to intercept her, but Owen was quicker, gently but firmly catching Katherine's arm before she could reach Eleanor. Don't make this worse for yourself, he advised quietly. Katherine wrenched away from his grasp, her composure shattered, beyond repair. You'll regret this, she spat, her gaze sweeping the room. All of you. She snatched up her purse and stormed toward the door, pausing only to deliver a final barb to Michael. I expect you'll be moving back in with Mommy permanently. Now. How fitting. After the door slammed behind her, the house fell into a heavy silence. Eleanor felt the physical toll of the confrontation in her trembling hands and rapid heartbeat, but alongside the exhaustion was a profound sense of liberation. The truth, however painful, had finally been spoken aloud. Dr. Chen moved to check, Eleanor's pulse, her professional concern evident. You should rest now, she advised. This has been an enormous strain on your system. As the group began to disperse, Michael remained seated, his expression haunted by the recognition of his own complicity. I don't know how to fix this, Mom, he said finally. All the time we've lost, all the damage done. Eleanor squeezed his hand gently. We start by speaking truth to each other, she replied. No more performances, no more avoidance, just two imperfect people finding their way back to family. As Grace helped Eleanor to her bedroom, she glanced back to see Michael still sitting in the living room, his head bowed in a pose that suggested both grief and, perhaps, the beginnings of genuine reflection. The reckoning had been painful but necessary, the first step toward healing what Katherine had so methodically broken. The August evening air carried the scent of Eleanor's roses through the open French doors as she arranged the final place setting on the dining room table. 3 months had passed since Katherine's departure. 3 months of gradual healing, of reclaiming spaces that had been overtaken, of relearning the contours of her own home. Eleanor stepped back to survey her work. The antique linen tablecloth that Katherine had banished to storage now draped elegantly across the table. Robert's carefully collected wine glasses gleamed in the soft light. The sterling silver candlesticks they'd received for their 25th anniversary had been polished to a gentle luster. "It looks perfect," Grace said, entering with a bouquet of garden flowers. "Just like you described it used to be." Eleanor smiled at the young woman who had become so much more than a caregiver. "Not exactly as it was," she replied. "Better, I think. It reflects the present, not just the past." That distinction had become important to Eleanor over the past months. She wasn't simply restoring what Katherine had dismantled. She was creating something new from the fragments, something that honored her history while embracing her current reality. The doorbell chimed, and Grace moved to answer it. Moments later, Vera's distinctive laugh echoed through the foyer, followed by Dr. Chen's more reserved greeting. Eleanor welcomed them into the living room, noting how smoothly they had transitioned from crisis allies to genuine friends. "I brought the legal update," Vera announced, setting her briefcase aside. "But it can wait until after dinner. Some things are more important than Eleanor Morrison's plea negotiations." Dr. Chen handed Eleanor a bottle of wine. "The settlement with the care facility was finalized yesterday," she added. "Their records now reflect that they received falsified documentation. It should help build the case for financial elder abuse." Eleanor accepted the wine with a nod of thanks. The legal proceedings continued their slow, methodical progression, but she had made a conscious choice not to center her recovery around Katherine's fate. That would have given her former daughter-in-law a power she no longer deserved. The front door opened again as Michael arrived, carrying dessert from Eleanor's favorite bakery. Behind him came Owen, his tall frame slightly stooped with age, but his blue eyes as alert and warm as ever. He carried a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "From my garden to yours," he explained, handing Eleanor the package. Inside was a rare heritage rose cutting, carefully prepared for planting. "Comte de Chambord," Eleanor identified it immediately. "Robert always wanted one of these." "I know," Owen replied with a gentle smile. "You mentioned it once in passing." The small gesture, Owen's careful attention to her casual words, touched Eleanor deeply. Their relationship had evolved with cautious deliberation over the past months, neither rushing nor denying the growing connection between them. As they moved to the dining room, Eleanor observed the tableau with a scholar's analytical eye and a survivor's hard-won appreciation. These people, brought together by crisis, had formed a family of choice that proved stronger than the biological bonds Katherine had so methodically poisoned. Grace served the meal she'd prepared, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged rather than someone merely employed. During the previous month, she had received her acceptance to medical school, prompting Eleanor to establish a scholarship fund in her name. "I've decided to specialize in geriatric medicine," Grace announced as she took her seat. "What happened? Here?" "It showed me how vulnerable elderly patients can be and how much difference one advocate can make." "Speaking of advocacy," Vera interjected, "the foundation paperwork is complete, Eleanor. The Morrison Elder Justice Initiative can begin accepting applications for legal aid next month." Eleanor nodded with satisfaction. The foundation, funded with a portion of the assets recovered from Katherine's schemes, would provide legal representation to seniors facing financial exploitation, turning her personal trauma into a resource for others. "Dr. Chen has agreed to serve on the medical advisory board," Vera continued, and Owen's contacts at the Globe have arranged for significant media coverage of the launch. I've also integrated Eleanor's case, anonymized of course, into our medical residency training, Dr. Chen added. The residents now receive specific education on identifying signs of elder manipulation versus genuine cognitive decline. The conversation flowed naturally throughout dinner, touching on personal developments and future plans rather than dwelling on past traumas. Michael spoke about his therapy sessions, his voice carrying a self-awareness that had been absent during Katherine's influence. I'm learning to recognize my patterns, he explained. The conflict avoidance, the willingness to accept convenient explanations rather than asking difficult questions. Eleanor reached over to squeeze his hand briefly, acknowledging his courage in confronting these painful truths. Their relationship remained a work in progress, trust rebuilding slowly through consistent presence rather than dramatic gestures or promises. After dinner, Michael helped Eleanor clear the table, a domestic ritual that had once been natural between them, but now carried deeper significance. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, he spoke quietly of their visit to Robert's grave, the previous week, the first time they had gone together since the funeral. I told Dad everything, Michael said, carefully drying a wine glass. About Katherine, about how I failed to protect you, about trying to find my way back. It felt like he was listening. He would be proud of your honesty, Eleanor replied. He always valued truth over comfort. When they rejoined the others in the living room, Owen was recounting a story from his reporting days, his journalist's gift for narrative holding the room's attention. Eleanor settled into her favorite chair, observing how each person present had contributed to her reclamation of self. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Vera raised her glass in a toast. To Eleanor, she said simply, who reminded us all that it's never too late to fight for your own story. After the guests had departed, with the exception of Owen, who lingered to help with final arrangements, Eleanor retrieved her new journal from the study. Unlike the one Katherine had altered, this volume was filled with Eleanor's authentic voice, documenting not just the crisis but the renewal that followed. I've been invited to guest lecture at the university next semester, she told Owen as they settled on the porch, the summer evening wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. A seminar on resilience narratives in American literature. Owen nodded, understanding the significance of this return to her academic identity. From lived experience to academic analysis, he observed. The scholar in you was never far beneath the surface, was it? Sometimes we need to be reminded of who we are, Eleanor replied. Or perhaps shown new aspects of ourselves we never knew existed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies illuminate the garden where Eleanor's roses, including those that had survived Katherine's neglect, bloomed with renewed vigor. The metaphor wasn't lost on Eleanor, whose academic mind still appreciated such literary parallels. I was thinking about time today, she said finally, about how Katherine believed she was simply waiting for my time to run out. How ironic that her actions ultimately gave me more life, not less. Owen's hand found hers in the gathering dusk, his touch gentle but sure. The best response to those who try to diminish you is to expand, he said. You've done that remarkably well? Eleanor glanced at the man beside her, this unexpected companion who had entered her life when she least anticipated new beginnings. At 68, she had assumed her most significant relationships were behind her. Katherine had counted on that assumption, believing Eleanor would be too diminished by age and grief to fight for her future. How wrong she had been. As twilight deepened into night, Eleanor watched the first stars appear above the garden she and Robert had cultivated together, the home that had almost been stolen from her, the life she had reclaimed through courage and connection. The legal battles with Katherine would continue for months, perhaps years, but they no longer defined Eleanor's days or limited her horizon. I've been thinking of taking a short trip to the coast this fall, she said. giving voice to an idea that had been forming gradually. I haven't seen the ocean since before Robert died. The Maine coast is particularly beautiful in October, Owen offered. The tourists are gone, but the weather often holds fair. Eleanor smiled at the careful way he made the suggestion without presumption. I'd like that, she replied simply. The borrowed time Katherine thought she was stealing had transformed instead into time reclaimed. Not just the years Eleanor might have lost to her daughter-in-law's schemes, but the quality of those years, the depth and authenticity that could only come from confronting difficult truths. Tomorrow would bring more steps in this ongoing renewal: a meeting with Timothy about the foundation, lunch with Michael, the planting of Owen's rose cutting in the garden. Small actions that collectively formed the architecture of a life reclaimed and reimagined. Eleanor Morrison opened her new journal, the blank page before her no longer a void to be feared, but a space to be filled with her own words, her own truth. The pen moved smoothly across the paper as she began to write, her voice clear and unmistakable her own. Today marks 3 months since the reckoning. 3 months of rediscovering strength I had forgotten I possessed. What Katherine never understood was that real power isn't found in controlling others, but in fully claiming yourself. Your voice, your truth, your right to determine your own story's ending. Or perhaps, as I'm learning now, it's a new beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.